Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Awaken Your Soul's Journey, the podcast. I'm Angela, and so excited to be here today with Susan Hensley. And Susan is a transformational coach, a speaker, and an author that's dedicated to helping people navigate life transitions with joy, creativity, and resilience. With decades of experience as a corporate executive and leadership coach, Susan has a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities that come with major life changes. Drawing on her extensive background in HR, coaching, and journalism, Susan's mission is to empower people to unlock their inner wisdom, creativity, and sense of play during times of uncertainty and change. Through workshops, speaking engagements, and one-on-one coaching, she guides clients to rediscover their authentic selves and infuse their lives with more color, meaning, and joy. And I am so happy to have you here today, and welcome to the podcast.
Angela, thank you for having me. And I'm really pleased to be here today and to talk a little bit about how, your listeners may want to play with art to help them.
I think that's such a fun and wonderful way to express all of the emotion that's coming up with grief. After a significant loss, we have so many emotions, strong emotions that are coming up. This is a great way to release it. And I think a fun way to do it too. So I'm anxious to get talking more about it. So, how did you get started on art journaling?
I really started quite accidentally. It was a calling back when I had my corporate job, ended up with a sort of a side hustle selling art that she would be commissioned to do. She's very, very talented woman. And some of us were admiring what she had done and saying, we have no artistic ability. And she says, everyone's got some. You may not want to actually produce it, but that it was fun. So she had a few of us over on a Saturday and was introducing the color wheel. And I sat in the corner and made a mess with my paints. And I didn't intend to make a mess. I was trying to follow some instructions. But as I got into it, I had such fun. And even though it turned out like this brown splotch, I loved it. It just really reignited creating and sort of playfulness for the sake of it, right? I didn't think I was starting a side hustle. I wasn't doing it for any reason, but I loved what I created. And I actually took it home and put it on the refrigerator because I loved it. It sparked that glimmer of joy. First, in my corporate career, I've done a tremendous amount of coaching, career coaching, executive coaching. And in my learnings, talk about the need to follow these little glimmers of joy, right? Follow them. And so I started following it for art journaling, just playing with it, very inexpensive materials. And what I very quickly found, the pandemic occurred not too long afterwards, and things got very intense. Work became difficult. I was very anxious about several of the people in my life. They felt very vulnerable to me. And I really found it to be a safe container and a spot, just playing with art to process all these different emotions, whether it was anger or rage or fear, that drawing for me, like these little screaming faces, like almost an emoji, but actually drawing it with the words coming out, or tears or slashes, was so cathartic. And it was a safe spot, right? I wasn't having to process everything because I was working full time from home and doing a lot of caregiving. And so it was just this little container that held it. And I then got really curious about why, and went on to study the brain effects and sort of have come up with what led me to the book and ultimately to switch careers. But to your original question, I just stumbled into it, and then it became so personally powerful. And as we talk about grief with your community, what I've recognized with challenging emotions, and people say this all the time, I don't have words, right? Particularly after a tragedy or a loss, because we don't. But what we know is the swirl of emotions, and playing with color, whether it's crayons or paint or collage, color can capture, and it's that right side of our brain, what's happening in our heart and our emotions in a way that many cases we can't verbalize because it's layer after layer of feeling,
Mhm.
right? It can be
Yes.
anger and sadness and desperation and shock, right? Whatever those emotions are, they're swirling and they're not static, and playing with even those images, and everyone's images are different. I ended up with a lot of swirling images and slashes. Those are shapes and symbols that, as I process difficult emotions, it also feels good to get them out of your mind onto a page, and you can go back and look at the page. And I find such compassion for who I was at that moment, right? I may be feeling very calm when I look back at the page. I may be somewhere different, but it's also a really interesting reminder. And I've now done this for 6, 7 years. When you flip through how resilient we are, how we get sort of swept away by emotion.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about, so please jump in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, absolutely. Sometimes our emotions, like you say, sweep us away. The sayings coming in like make a mountain out of a molehill kind of thing, it's in the moment, it feels so intense and we can get really anxious about the smallest thing because those emotions are just waiting to find, a reason to come up. And so I love how you explain this process of getting those emotions on paper using color and line, and then going back and looking at it and reflecting on it. I think that's beautiful. That's a wonderful process.
Yeah, gosh, Angela, I love what you said about the mountain out of a molehill, because when that's building, and to your point, it's looking for release, finding something that's healthy and productive versus talking yourself out of it, or right. Sometimes we'll try and reframe, or we'll try and think about, oh, what I do have, or feeling grateful. I did a lot of that in my life. I would be aware of the emotion and I would try and just think it out versus feeling it and letting it flow through me, right? I would try and turn it around or find a bright side. And, it's actually much less daunting to just express it. And what I loved, and once again, I'm using crayons, very inexpensive things, and collage, so that there's this sense of playfulness. As children, when we were very young, we would just give in to that, and it's this safe spot, to scribble, to draw, to, I've had these little faces screaming out words like sadness, rage, shame, whatever the emotion. Many times it would be a number of so not only when you look back in the process do you realize it, you tend to feel a lot of self-compassion for yourself. And I think we could all use more of that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, it was such a good and still is visual reminder of, like, this too shall pass. I can ride this wave and the wave will come down. But while I'm riding it, I don't have to be taken over by it. I can just ride it. And then I can appreciate the calm and I can ride it again. And it's, in terms of looking back, so powerful, because there is a point that you start to see, I think of it as your soul talking back to you, encouraging you through symbolism. I'll write words as they pop in, even though I'm playing with art, not to make art, just to express myself, just like I would in a written diary. It's just playing with it in that same private setting. I've been shocked at the encouragement I have gotten from that inner wisdom, or that place of soul. Even if it's nothing of, you'll be okay, or all of a sudden I'm starting to draw flowers or suns are starting to come up, right? Sometimes I draw a sun with a cloud that's crying or an eye that's crying, right? And
Mm.
I love art or playing with art. And you can tell I keep it where I was maybe as a 5 or 6 year old artist. I think that's really helpful that we don't think we're creating something like play in that safe space of childhood. But it captures that duality that you can feel some, I don't know, whether it's optimism or sun, whatever the sun symbolizes to you. And there can be a cloud that's raining or crying, and they can both just exist on the page with no judgment, right? It's
Mm.
just you're drawing. And I think sometimes when we're talking with friends, not with a therapist necessarily, or even writing, there can be a little bit of that judgment about how can I feel okay when I should just be over here, or vice versa. And I find a page with playing with art holds that duality that is just human really, really well in a really sacred way.
Yeah, and I was thinking about I was an educator, so I taught art classes to young children. And I just remember doing the art with them sometimes and just the feeling of calm and peace and just being able to express yourself in that way without any, like you say, judgment in any way, and just to feel what that feels like to have that come up. And I was thinking, about my reference to making a mountain out of a molehill. Like lots of times, these small things happen to us. There's no small thing underneath of it. There's a big thing
Yes.
underneath of
Yeah.
there. And when you talk about putting that on the page and starting to unpack it in that way, we can find out what really is at the core of those emotions that are coming up.
Yeah, the image that popped into my mind as I was listening to you just now is really that of an iceberg, right? So you see
Mhm.
a little above the surface and all of that. And I can talk about some of my clients generically or the feedback I've gotten from the online training or workshops. But I know for me, I was really surprised at a period how much fear was underlying. I was processing a lot of what I would have called angry emotions, and I was labeling them as rage and anger and shame and some of those. And when I really played with it, I recognized so much of what was laying under those for me at that particular time was fear. And the minute I could see that the fear, I started to choose a slightly softer color. These are crayons, by the way.
Mhm.
Nothing particularly fancy. It enabled me to start drawing like hearts and moved me just into an interesting place. But yeah, that story popped into my mind with your analogies. Yes, there was so much laying under that the surface I could identify because it was hot and it felt like, you know,
Mhm.
anger. But as I dug deeper, really through playing with art and then being curious, what's here? Does this feel true? It was interesting how much I think fear and uncertainty came up about, what am I doing next even? And how do I move forward?
That whole unknown piece is so scary. When people lose someone, often your whole path changes. Just not knowing what lies ahead can be really scary, and it can put us in a real tailspin.
Well, it's a freeze that can happen when the transitional coaching in my training, when we talk about passings, because that's biggest life transition, or it's one of the biggest ones we can go for. Here's many cases it's setting off this life quake. You're having to redefine yourself on so many levels. It may be a redefinition of where you live, what you do day in, day out, how your very day is structured. And in honoring that and giving yourself all that space, because, right, a transition starts with an ending, whether you've seen the ending coming or not. It can happen a few different ways, and it's something that's happened to you in most cases. There's that long, long, messy middle where it's not clear and it's uncertain, and you can be going back. And what are ways you mark, to even keep going back to how do you create some ritual and sacredness around the ending? And then as you're trying to reinvent what this looks like going forward, we so want it, we as humans, I think culturally in the West, to be linear and smoother and clearer than life or the human heart is. And when I work with people and coach them, that's one of the hardest things to get over, is that long, long, long middle where it feels like you're going sideways, maybe a step forward, and then two or three back before you get to a place of some new habits, some new rituals, some new life. And the art, it can be really helpful. Obviously, working with trusted people in groups where you can get support, but just capturing like the fog, the twisty paths, the twisty roads, I think once again can be that inner knowing talking back with you that, yeah, you're just right now on a journey and you don't know what it will look like. And, what are some of the possibilities of what it might look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have a book. I see it
Yeah.
behind you. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about that. What's in there for the reader?
Sure. Well, as I said, the whole art journaling thing just started for me. And I found it so powerful. And as I was using it, I got some messages that I needed to take a leap, if you will. And I didn't know what that would look like. But I thought I need to trust this. And so I quit my job and wasn't quite sure what I would do next. And when I joke about time frames, I'll tell you a little bit of a story. I thought, okay, I'm going to go walk the Camino Santiago. I'm going to spend
Hmm.
4 weeks in northern Spain and do this pilgrimage. And I'm going to know what I want to do when I get off of it. Now, it was an amazing experience, but I recognized my desire to not just be floating in this free-form state of not knowing was so great. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I finished it. And that was a great learning a little bit about how we have to accept a process. And I met really amazing people on it, and that's what they say. You meet a lot of people who are processing loss and are processing the loss of a loved one, for sure. It depends on, different people's faith, but you met that and their openness. And some people are doing it for the exercise or the challenge. So it's a really interesting group of people. But I went sort of looking for an answer. I realized it just wasn't there, obvious, or time yet. And I think time yet was a big lesson. And came back and I was doing some part-time work with the corporations because that's where my background had been. And I then shored up my personal coaching certifications and life coaching. And I was talking to a really trusted person. I was telling everyone I know and every client about art journal. It's like, this is a really interesting thing to help you process transitions and emotions. And finally, someone said to me, trusted advisor, why don't you write a book? You have a whole first career in journalism. And I'd always said, oh, I never wanted to write a book. And I think it's because coming out in journalism, and I would never write a personal book. And who am I to write a book? Blah, blah, blah. We do all that. But
Hmm.
then it resonated as truth. And I think we know. And it's like, I'm telling people this, I'm telling clients, it's a way to share more broadly because the story's simple. I tell it through what happened with me, but also using a lot of brain science. I was really fortunate when I was writing the book, several major studies and a really great book about the impact of art. And that's many arts, and it's viewing as well as participating. That includes music and dance. This is a great book was published, as well as several other studies to explain what actually is happening, how we're leaving our left brain when we're creating, which is discerning and judging and logical and oh so helpful in most of the days, but we can overuse it, and it's not great for the messy emotions. We really need to get into that right brain, which is much more holistic and intuitive and integrated. So I wrote the book, and then as I was writing the book, it became apparent it turns, and it's an easy book and with lots of tips, and it goes through what you need to start art journaling and the science of why. But I realized it would also turn in really well to an online course. Then I started doing workshops. So these little bites that of a path I was going down anyways, with the coaching to help people through a variety of life's transitions, ended up becoming something I felt compelled to share, because when it works for someone, it tends to really work. It sparks that playfulness. It opens up creativity. They want to play with art for 10 minutes a day or however long. It's not a should. And I think we all could use some trusty companions, things that are our go-tos that are really healthy for us. And art journaling can be for some folks.
Yeah, for sure. And what you said about it not being a should,
Yeah.
something that you look forward to, it becomes self-care, really, in the end, because you're doing something that you love and
Yeah.
it's good for you.
I never would have stuck with it. I developed a habit inadvertently. There's lots of habits, working out, drinking water, right? Whatever in the world of health that we do because we should, and we know they're good for us. And we, in many cases, feel good. Art journaling sort of pulled me towards it, and it was just fun. So I kept playing with it. And on my website, I have a free PDF, and I sort of encourage anyone I speak to. It's like, if this sparks any curiosity, it's a really low barrier to start. You don't need any special equipment, just play with it for 10 minutes for a few days and see how you're feeling. And if it sparks anything, you will probably want to keep doing it or going to it. I see it with my coaching career. It's nice to have a bunch of different tools and things we can do. And so when this one works for people, it's really profound. And like I said, it's easy. You can keep stuff tucked away in your purse or backpack or car, and do it as you commute, do it as you wait, right? There's lots of little places. This is not a huge canvas with oils. It's a little notepad and some colors, right? You can make it as big as you want, but I try and make it as accessible, because although it's nice if you do it at the same time every day, there are moments when you need to process on the fly. And many of us have been trained to use our breath, which is fantastic. Sometimes breath isn't enough. Sometimes you need to get your body sort of shaken out or scribbling or doing something. And it can be really handy on the fly for processing things when you've been a little triggered, maybe.
I love that because there are people who the breath is just, like you say, not enough because it's hard to sit with it when you've got all of that emotion coming up, and to just be really still. It can be really difficult. So I love what you're presenting. Mhm.
Yeah, I do breath work and have a meditation practice. And I think that's why I've liked this so much, because it's not an either or, it's adding things for the right times
Yeah,
when you need them. And it's having sort of a suite of things to help you care for yourself that you can layer or choose when to use which one, right? Not one size fits all. And yes, sometimes just getting some things worked through is really helpful.
yeah, for sure. So we have this inner critic, and I struggled with this a lot. I never realized it really before I started doing more work with myself after I lost Blaine. And I had this voice in my head that was saying all kinds of awful things to me. I never realized it. I and so I'm curious about how this might help that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's so interesting is we all have that voice, but sometimes we're not even aware of it because it's always been there, or something triggers it to start screaming. And in all fairness to the voice, because I can speak sort of harshly about it, mine is there, and I believe everyone's, to try and protect us and keep us safe.
Yes.
But like many things, it really goes awry and can hold us back and tell us very frightening stories. That's mine. What I love about art journaling, and why I talk a lot about channeling your inner child artist, I love the fact that you taught art, is that's a very free place. We were told by society whatever we were told about creativity, and it's free because if we can get ourselves in that place of play or curiosity where it's just the act of, that really brings down the inner critic. And as you notice that inner critic comes down, and I've even done some exercises of making this like a play day, I've asked people to turn to their inner art critic and say, like, you aren't like invited to this play date. This is just me making a mess. I appreciate your help, don't need it. And actually try to start a dialogue with your inner critic. Not that you're bad and terrible, but I don't need any help or protection right now.
Mhm.
I've got this. I can scribble, I can scribble. And in starting to make friends, if you will, with that inner critic, it creates that distance. And I think to what you said just a moment, you weren't even aware before Lane's passing of maybe it was there, or even how strong it was. Maybe it got a lot stronger because of the fear and the loss, or maybe you just didn't fully hear it. It was just like a thought in the back, but was there. Whatever, once you become aware of it, one, it can be really shocking how mean it is. And you would never talk to anyone you loved, or even a stranger. You would just never talk to someone the way it is. And as you become more and more aware, you can work either in your art journal, or you can work, if you will, within yourself. And like I said, I think there's real value in recognizing this is a part of you that feels it has a job. In most of the case, it is to keep you safe, or to keep you from making a mistake, even if it's being mean. And you can start to give yourself that reassurance. I don't need that right now, or I don't need this, right? And that's what I love with the plane of the art. But then I can start to put another story. At the beginning of our discussion, when I told you I was very proud of that brown splotchy mess and I hung it on the refrigerator, be proud of your art creations, right? If you're tapping into just expressing yourself in that childlike state, pause and give yourself some praise for just having done that. And that's a really nice way to help to put some, what I call, balance, or to help, yes, rebalance that inner critic, make it a healthier voice. It's tricky, right? Any given day, I work very actively. I hear a self-critical voice, replacing it either with an encouraging voice, or a voice of some praise. And what is really needed right now, and where is this voice coming from? But playing with the art journal is a good place to sort of explore that voice. Some of it's society, or the way we grew up, right? Some of it we hear an adult figure from our childhood that's no longer helpful to us. We're all different in that way. And your art journal can also help you work through some of those, if they're familial patterns. Sometimes, it was a non-supportive adult who could have been a teacher or coach as well, that's that voice we get stuck in our heads.
So, how do people find you and how do they work with you?
Oh, sure. Well, easiest way to find me is the website, which is just susan-hensley.com. There's a contact me button. So if someone wants to work on either transitional coaching or at workshop, anything like that, it's there. But the book, online training, video to help people get started, the free PDF that just gives tips of how to get started. It's all on the website. So that's the easiest spot.
So when people come to you, do you do one-on-one things or is it walk? I understood courses. You've got courses that people
Yeah.
take or
So
workshops.
I do one-on-one coaching, absolutely. And that is typically for people going through some sort of life transition. Could be job, could be physical, it could be recent loss, could be any number of things. There's a series of life transitions that we go through. Some are huge, which create, to use this phrase, life quakes, where nothing is going to be the same ever again, versus some of the smaller ones. And when you have two or three transitions happening, that's sort of that life quake where we really have to reassess. That's where my coaching specialty sits within and where I find art journaling, quite honestly. I do workshops and then there is online training, but if someone wanted to work just one-on-one with me, it's just that contact me, send me a note and we'd chat.
Nice. And I encourage people to reach out if they are feeling that this resonates with them, because sometimes we watch these podcasts or these videos and we think, wow, that's really neat, I should do that, and then we don't. And so I'm saying this time follow through, because I think there's a lot here for people who are interested in exploring their emotions in a different way. And I think it can really open up some beautiful perspectives and really inspire someone to take that next step. You talk about this space where you don't know what's next and trying to be comfortable in that place until the timing is right. You talked about that for yourself, and I've experienced this as well. I know how hard it is to sit and not feel like you're accomplishing anything or you're getting anywhere.
It's the
And
hardest.
yes, yes, absolutely. So, just being in this space and exploring what might come next, or to set some kind of, I know I was thinking about setting goals for the future. Right now, I'm kind of doing well, I'd kind of like to, not knowing exactly the direction and feeling a little bit like, is it going to come to me? Am I going to have to do this? It's a strange space to be in.
That liminal, that in between space is so uncomfortable for us humans. And I've made this mistake. It's so important for us to sit in, because if we sort of go too fast or too early, I think we don't give it the fullest consideration, or the most opportunity doesn't open up, which is really difficult for people in that non-knowing space, and having either trusted advisors or things to just help you stay little open in that is really, really important. So easy to say, so hard to do. I want to recognize that of the many things I have said during this podcast, that is probably one of the hardest to do for any of your listeners who might describe themselves as either a bit type A or love to check things off a list and love to know what's next.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
And because we were raised that way, we were
Right.
told that we had to get things done. And in order to, live this fulfilling life, you had to do XYZ and you had to do it well. And, you don't make mistakes, and all of that is
Yeah.
in there too.
Society and the way we were raised, all very well intentioned, but there's a point that I think as we grow and develop, shaking off some of that and figuring out how to chart our own course based on our values and what's sort of true and authentic for us is so important. But it's those are the sort of things that we're not taught to do.
Mhm.
And we have to, through the challenges that life presents us, figure out what that is. And I think when we do, life is so much more fulfilling and richer and joyful. There's real reward in that hard work for sure. Because that's where I think you get that secondary growth after loss, that regeneration. I know in a lot of my reading and coaching practice, you want that regeneration, not stagnation after something has happened. And that's sort of a risk in any transition, that something occurs and we stay stuck for too long. That's not stuck in the liminal sense where you're open. It's that you've gone in that shell, and how do you reach for growth again and start growing?
Mm-hmm. And I definitely knew it when I stepped into this work and realized how much fun I was having and how much I was enjoying it. And so when you reach this place where it's like, okay, that was great. What else is there? There's that space where you're trying to figure that out. And yeah, it's really interesting to be there. And, you know, learning to be in that space and being okay to be in that space. Yeah.
So I love that, because I was watching your face, and what you just said was like that glimmer. You said fun, and your face lit up, and it was like, this was good. So, Angela, I just heard you when you were talking about when this became fun and that you wanted to do more of it. That sort of takes me to where our conversation started when I was talking about art journaling. There was that little bit of a glimmer, that spark of fun and wanting to repeat it. And I encourage everyone, follow that. It doesn't have to be the entire new career or fit your job. You don't have to don't have to hold it tightly, but follow it. Be an explorer when you get that glimmer. It's like, what about this feels good? In your case, I'm serving, I'm sharing what I've learned, I'm connecting with other people's similar experiences, whatever it may be. I've made those up for you. I'm
They're,
guessing that's some of what
they're
they
great.
were.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You can tell I've been listening, but whatever it is that's motivating, that's the stuff at which you start to build your new path on. And that's what's guiding you, right? That's that soul guidance, is those glimmers, those sparks, and you explore them for what they are, and then also for like the underlying value, which in many cases is connection or service or sharing, as we get to know who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I love that. You just gave me some great advice in that little piece right there. Yeah. Yeah. I'll definitely think about those underlying aspects when I'm trying to set up this year's intentions. Yeah. I think it's great.
Yeah, so that's always trying to get under what are the foundational value. I think really helps, because sometimes when we think about this year's intention resolutions, we get to the what is the end state, or what is the action,
Mhm.
versus what is my value. And I know in my journey at this stage of my life, because I joked, I said I'd never write a book, which was very ego driven. It's like, well, no, I want to share what I know and what I've learned to see if it would help someone else. So I can stop saying I never wanted to write a book, like that's all about me being an author, and realize it's coming from, this is a path that I think it can be shared in, that might be more effective than me just talking to whoever I may meet on the street or in the grocery store, accosting an unsuspecting person in the checkout line.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. So people, I will make sure that they have the link so they can get to your website and check out what you do and hopefully work with you. And also, do you have any advice that you want to leave us with? Anything that we missed?
We didn't miss it, but you reference, sometimes people hear it and don't do it. I would say, if this has sparked any curiosity at all, one, you can go to the website and get the PDF how to start, but I'll give you a 3-minute exercise you could do at home. Find, if you have any colored pens, anything with color at home, great. If you don't, see if you can come up with a pencil and a black pen, or a blue and a black pen. Find a song on your phone, 3 minutes, just do a timer, fill a piece of paper with either scribbling, circles. If you can remember what you used to love to draw as a kid, it could be faces. People draw bunnies, trees, flowers, rivers, cars, trucks. I mean, right? It depends on what it was. Do
Mhm.
it for 3 minutes. Just, and then just stop and say, how did that feel? Was that at all a release? If there was any little bit of fun or play there, you may want to take the next step. You can sort of give yourself a little bit of a timed test, because that's something you can do as soon as you stop listening to this. And I would really encourage people to give it that little bit of examination if you're at all curious, and then see where that goes.
Love that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you again for taking the time to do this
Well,
today. I really enjoyed all of it.
yeah, it was great being here. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation as well.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for watching, and bye for now.